بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Human soul is a very important topic. It is studied in different disciplines. So, from different perspectives, different aspects, it is studied. Philosophers have interest in this topic very much because philosophers want to explain humanity and what makes human beings and what makes them different from other types of animals, etc. So they have great interest in human soul. Even we have the whole science of philosophical knowledge of science. Yeah, psychology in Arabic is called ilmun nafs. But in addition to ilmun nafs, what we have in the hawzas is philosophical science of soul. We call it ilm nafs falsafi. So Mullah Sadra has written extensively on this, and some teachers in the hawza, they teach, this topic takes, more than a year. So philosophers have interest in ilmun nafs. Theologians have also interest, especially because they want to talk about free will, about resurrection, eternal life. People of hadith have interest because this is one of the topics which is mentioned in the hadith, especially from some hadith you may get the impression that human soul or human spirit is created much earlier than human body. So they have also discussion about this. Quran itself has lots of discussion about human soul, about nafs. So we have these different perspectives, sciences. We have even in fiqh and usul discussions about this. So it's a very important topic, and if someone wants to master Islamic understanding of human soul, must study all these Quranic references, hadith references, commentaries on them, plus philosophy, theology, etc. But the main things that we need to know can be summarized in this way. First, what do we mean by soul and what do we mean by human soul? Because human soul is a combination of soul and human. So, what is soul? It seems that soul can be existing in non humans as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to say human soul, human soul. So, what is soul? What is human soul? What are some of the main aspects of the human soul? And is human soul immaterial or it's material? These are some of the main questions. Of course, we can also talk about other things as well, but time may not be permitting us. In Islamic philosophy, they say that not only human beings, but even animals, and not only even animals, but even plants, they have nafs, they have soul. So we are not only saying human beings have body and soul. They say even plants have soul. And when they argue for it, one of the main arguments is this, that when you reach animals or plants which have life, you see their responses to the environmental factors cannot be predicted, or in other words, they are not fixed. Some of you, I'm sure you are familiar with Arabic. So they say it's not ala watiratin wahid. It's not the same way always. If we put a drop of ink on a piece of paper or tissue, when the ink is spreading, if you have the same material for the ink, for the paper, the same temperature, the same air pressure, it would always be the same. It's always the same. And therefore you can predict, and therefore we can use this in technology. But when we have a living being, even at the level of plants, they don't respond always the same way. For example, you make two flowers in pots. So you have two flower pots. In each of them, you put flowers of the same type and put them next to window, get air, give them same amount of water, everything. But they don't grow exactly the same. They grow differently. And this becomes more visible in animals and most visible in human beings. Human beings' behaviors may follow general patterns, but at the same time, it's unique. Even twins would not behave the same way. Even one person may not behave always the same way. So, there is something other than body which is governed by rules of physics and chemistry. There is soul, there is nafs. For animals, we call an-nafsul haywaniya, animal soul. For plants, we call an-nafsun nabatiya, vegetative soul. And for human beings, we say human soul. It may look that they are three different types of souls, but another way of looking at it is that it's like one floor building, two floor building, and three floor building. Because even we have vegetative soul and animal soul. So it means that in animal soul you have the characteristics which are signs of perfection, not the limitations, of animal and something more. So of plants and something more. In animal soul, whatever is in a vegetative soul, you have it plus more. And in human soul, whatever is in animal or vegetative soul is there plus more. When someone is in permanent, for example, vegetative state, suppose someone who has brain death and is now in vegetative state, so body, if you want to look at it philosophically, it's better to say it this way, that body is now run by the first floor of the human soul, which is the vegetative. And therefore, the body only makes certain responses. But if you speak to this person, would not show any reaction. But it doesn't mean that this person has lost his human soul. No, it means that the level of engagement of a three-floor building is now only at the level of the first floor, at least as much as we who are in this physical world can see it. If you were able to see the other side, you see that still he's a human soul, he's completely a human being, no problem. But the level of engagement of the body is limited and restricted. When we sleep, again, the level of engagement of the soul is reduced. Quran says, Allahu yatawaffa al-anfusa hina mawtaha wallati lam tamut fi manamiha. Allah takes the soul when someone dies. And those who have not died when they sleep. So even when we sleep, some levels of engagement of the soul would be stopped. Not 100%. Why? Because still the soul has to manage body. Many activities, vital activities, have to continue. But the attention of the soul is reduced. And this is why the soul can have some rest. The soul can have some rest. The soul can have some dreams. The soul can, rise and fly to the kingdom of things, to malakut. But in a basic level, is connected to the body. فيمسك التي قضى عليها الموت ويرسل الأخرى إلى أجل مسمى. If someone is supposed to die, then the soul would not be released. If someone is supposed to wake up, the soul is released. So the levels of soul, the levels of operation of the soul, the levels of engagement of the soul with body and dunya are different. It is interesting that for some souls, even after death, still soul has some connection with body. And soul keeps the body fresh. Some people, long after they were buried, they found their bodies fresh. Last night, actually, there are many examples, but last night I was watching, a documentary on lives of one of ulama, Ayatollah Najafiya Hamadani. Ayatollah Najafiya Hamadani's father was called Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Arab. And he had studied in Najaf for many years, and Akhund Mullah Hussein Quliya Hamadani had asked his student Sayyid Ahmad Karbala'i to take care of him. And he for many years studied, then he went to Hamadan and he lived more than 100 years. Anyway, it's a beautiful life story, but when he died, so first, as amana, as a kind of trust, temporarily, they kept the body in Hamadan till they sent to Najaf to be buried in Wadi Salam in Najaf. And his son says that after, I think, 37 days, when they wanted to take the body to Najaf. He mentioned the name of a doctor that was responsible, came to check that this dead body is the body of this person to authorize. So after 37 days, they opened kafan and body was fresh. Doctor said, when did he die? They said, some 30 days ago. He said, still his lips are, red like a ordinary person, although he was more than 100 years old. Then they took to Najaf, and Ayatollah al-Uzma Hakim was going to say a prayer on his body to be buried in Wadi Salam. By that time, about 40 days had passed, and it was hot weather. So they asked people to stay away because they didn't want people to smell, bad fragrance, in case if the body is damaged, etc. His son-in-law says that when they opened the kafan, there was a beautiful fragrance. And then instead of asking people to go away, they asked people to come close, and they saw his body is fresh. So, what keeps this body fresh? And there are many examples that when they were reconstructing graves of some of the ulama, they found their body fresh. This is, in my understanding, this is their soul who is permitted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the purity of this person. That is the soul that is permitted to keep the body fresh without being in need of giving the body chemicals. The soul is able to run this body. When we were alive, or this person was alive, the soul had to do lots of operations to keep our body as it is. Oxygen, glucose, everything had to be checked and kept to certain level so that the body can function and remain. But this soul is still having ability to run this in a different way. Or another level of engagement of the soul with body, which is more general, is attention. Unfortunately, some people, even if they believe in soul and spirit, they don't know that the soul is still attached to the body. Therefore, they burn the body. They put body sometimes in acid so that it's quickly dissolved. But this is very painful for that soul. They don't understand this. They say, oh, it is dead. This soul is very much attached to the body. It is true that soul has no place, but it doesn't mean that soul has no concern for any place. No, soul has concern with his family, with his house, her house, with the body certainly, because for many, many years this body was with this soul. Especially it takes time in the early hours and days and nights. The soul has very much concern for the body. And we are, advised that, for example, when you bury someone, then close relatives, to go back, or for example, if some people can remain, during the night close to the grave, these have impact. We do talqin next to the grave, it has impact. So we have to understand that the connection between soul and body is so deep that would not quickly stop. So there are different levels of function of the soul and engagement of the soul with running of body. In human beings, we have the most advanced, the most sophisticated ones. It has different phases, different stages, different conditions. One aspect of human soul, in its third level, in its you know maximum, above, when it is above plants and animals, is that human soul has ability to reason, ability to argue, ability to understand universal things, ability to have self consciousness and self assessment, self knowledge, self improvement. Animals don't think about these things. No animal would, review what they have done yesterday, let alone how much progress they have made over years. Neither there is choice as much as is in human beings. Animals have choice, but their choices are very limited. And certainly they don't have moral choices. So even if they choose, they are not morally responsible. Human beings have wider scope of choices to make, and plus they are free, and therefore they can be morally responsible. Another aspect is human understanding, reasoning, collecting data, processing them, and analyzing them, and putting them together and form arguments. Even human beings can experiment, can create artificial. No animal would make artificial, for example, environment for experimenting. So, at the top level of human soul, we not only have functions of plants and animals, we have exclusive human functions. And the more we give prominence to these exclusive ones, the more human our life becomes. If I more, focus on drinking and eating, this is what plants also do, what animals also do. But if I more focus on making my choices more ethical, on knowledge, on reasoning, on wisdom, this makes my life more human beings. On love, on arts, on beauty. For animals, arts are not important. For animals, beauty is not an issue. Everything is done by instincts. Beautification, decoration are not there. Yes, they do things in a beautiful way, but that's the way. They don't have concern about beauty. Just automatically they make things beautiful. So, human soul, if is trained to function in all levels, especially the top ones, then we can have a complete human life. Otherwise, sometimes this life, although it's lived by a human being, but it's an animal life. As it can sometimes be a vegetative life, like someone who is, ill on the bed and has gone through brain death, for example. But the good thing about this person is that his soul might be still very spiritual, very pious, very human. But some people who are living at the level of animal, when they are conscious and healthy, then there is nothing more. It's not that there is something more and it's disconnected. There is nothing more here because this person has not developed those potentials. Then you may wonder how we can prove that this soul is not just a property of the body or a characteristic of the body, because some materialistic uh, minded people, they may say everything is body, but human body is more sophisticated and therefore can have these activities like, reasoning, understanding, studying, things like this. But everything is body, and if you give me uh, the same chemicals and time and laboratory, I can make something similar. I can create life. I can create even human beings, things like this. This is very wrong. First of all, no one can make life apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can use a living thing and use the rules that Allah has made to grow things. But you cannot take a dead thing and give life. Life comes from life. And therefore, if you take something which is absolutely dead, you cannot grant it life. Especially when it comes to human beings. In the same way that parents should not think that they have created the child, a scientist also that in the lab is cloning should not think that he has created this human being. They are not creating human being. Are parents creating? No, they're not creating. In philosophical sense, we say parents are preparatory cause, not originating cause. علة معد, علة إعدادي, not علة مفيد. They don't grant existence. They are just there to prepare the ground so that Allah grants existence to the child. So no one can create a human being, but they can contribute. And sometimes they do it in an ethical way or sometimes unethical way. Sometimes we can have genuine parents who are married and they have a child. Sometimes we may have illegitimate child. In the same way, maybe people clone human beings and they can be questioned whether this is ethical or not ethical, whether this is legitimate, not legitimate. But in the same way that illegitimate child is born and the existence comes from Allah, even if Allah is not approving the fornication, but if Allah doesn't permit, no child is born, no existence is given. Even in other cases like this, the distinction between iradiyya takwiniyya and iradiyya tashri'iyya. In self-knowledge also we have this discussion. So, no one can create human life except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And human soul, or sometimes you can call it ruh so that it's not mixed up with other types of souls. Human soul has some properties that show it is not material, it's not physical. One of them is knowledge. In self-knowledge, I have argued for immateriality of the soul in one unit, one lesson. We have mentioned some experiences, some people, because sometimes if you had a true dream, that would be for you the best proof. Something that has not yet happened, you dream. How can physics or chemistry explain this? Sometimes people have not been to some place, to a certain place. They had a dream, and when they went there, they found it exactly the same. How can physics or chemistry explain this? How can body explain this? Something has not yet happened, future event. You have it in dream, and then it happens. Dream is a great way, if if you have true dreams, great way to be assured that we are not just bodies. But there are other ways. One way that philosophers use very much is knowledge. Knowledge is immaterial because everything material changes. Everything material is divided or is divisible. But the knowledge is not divided, is not changing. You can gain more knowledge, but it's not that your knowledge changes and becomes wrong. So if I have met someone 20 years ago, 30 years ago, now after 20, 30 years, I meet him. That person has changed. I have changed. The world has changed, but I have the same image of him, how he looked 20, 30 years ago. And I say, you have changed a lot. It's not that my knowledge has also changed, became old, that image has become old, for example. No, I have that image when he was young. You cannot divide and say this part of left side of my knowledge, or right side or top of my knowledge. So this is also one way that they use. Ibn Sina has something that is interesting also, another way, and they call it rajul mu'allaq, suspended person. Suppose you are in a situation that you are not sitting or lying down on anything, so that you feel. If I'm sitting on the chair, I feel the chair. But suppose I am in a position that I am, suspended in the air. I'm hanging in the air, and the weather is just the way that my body would not feel any temperature. It's not cold or warm. There is no wind. There is no light to draw my attention. There is no noise. I am not hungry. I am not thirsty. I don't need to go to washroom. So suppose there is no physical thing to draw your attention. Absolutely empty your attention from anything physical. Still, you have understanding of yourself. Still, you are conscious of yourself. This is different from body. Body is coming with senses, and when air changes, when light changes, when there are noise, when I'm sitting, touching, people touch me or talk to me, whatever, I'm hungry, I am thirsty, body is involved. But when I can stop all these things and just focus, then still I see it's me, the same person. Even you can think that maybe you have lost part of your body, for example, but still it's you. It's not that when you lose, God forbids, for example, in someone accident loses his hand. It's not that he feels part of his personality is lost. So this is also a very good argument. In Irfan, in practical Irfan, the method of Allama Tabatabai and his teachers is through Ma'rifatun Nafs. In Risalatul Wilaya right now we are discussing this Ma'rifatun Nafs. And what they do is that they try to start with reflections. So you should spend, say, half an hour every day when you are free and you don't have, stress and pressure, etc., deadlines. Try to create time that for 30 minutes you can be yourself and try to think about yourself as distinct from your body. And then little by little you would see that your soul would emerge more. And then through your ma'rifah of your soul, you can get into the spiritual world and you can even get to ma'rifah, personal ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kind of knowledge by presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lots of new horizon will open through ma'rifatun nafs. And they have done this and they have experienced this and they have taught their students this. They say this is the best way of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through ma'rifatun nafs. Man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabb. I think this might be inshallah enough for today. I have about 7-8 minutes. If you have questions or comments, inshallah I can receive them. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Shomali, for that lecture. Obviously, a topic that you can keep going on and on forever, for a long time. There's so much to cover, and it's so interesting. And I appreciate the fact that you ended with the hadith, because we have discussed it with the girls, in three of our groups, and we've had reflection on it. So it's nice to have your scholarly perspective on that hadith. We did receive a couple of questions, and if there are sisters, either you can unmute yourselves and ask the question directly, or you can send it in the chat. But I'll just start with the questions that we received in the on the form. One question is, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Shomali.
Alaikum assalam.
It said that the human soul is eternal. Then why is it mentioned in the Quran that every soul will taste death?
Eternal has two meanings. One is that something which has no end, everlasting. Sometimes it's something which has no beginning and no end. So in both cases, eternal can be used. Azali in Arabic can be used in both cases. Human soul certainly has no end. So when we are created, we are not going to finish. خُلِقْتُمْ لِلْبَقَاءِ. Rasulullah said, you are created to continue, to endure. Here there is no ambiguity. There is no controversy about being everlasting. But about beginning, there is discussion. So some people say human soul has no beginning, so they are created eternally, and they just at certain time belong to the body. But some others, like Muslim philosophers, they say no. Human soul is created at certain time. And then here we have ideas of Masha'un who say human soul is Rawhaniyatul Huduth, means from the beginning it is created as a spiritual abstract thing. And Mullah Sadrat, it says Jasmaniyatul Huduth, Rawhaniyatul Baqa. It says He says that body through substantial motion reaches the point that then the soul is created by Allah. And he refers to the ayah ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. So Allah refers to different stages of development of embryo and then says we gave it another creation. So it's when soul is created but not separate from body. So from development of the embryo then reaches the point that Allah creates the soul. In any case, for them, soul has beginning, but no end. For some muhaddithin, they say no, soul existed before body. So in the paper Creation of Human Soul, I have explained that even according to the Quran and Hadith, we can argue that the soul is created and we are not eternal. So Alam Dhar has to be understood in the way that would not conflict with saying that every generation is born at this time. And, I'm not born before my, for example, father were born, or, we are not born at the same time. And Alam Dhar is true, but that is it has another interpretation. It's not that from millions of years ago, for example, or eternity, I was there and just my body is created. So this is a discussion about beginning. But about the end, no one says that we are going to end. So kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Maut is not end for us. Maut, death, is end of one stage and entering into the next stage.
Okay, thanks for making that distinction, because obviously we always take death as meaning that it's a finality of something. Then another person asked, how is the soul made? I think you've covered that already, unless you want to add something else to it.
Thank you.
It's okay. And another question we have is the heart of the believing servant. Where is the heart in relation to the soul?
Heart is part of the soul, which is responsible for emotions, for moral qualities, whether virtues or vices, for beliefs. Sometimes we even attribute all understandings to the heart. Sometimes maybe someone uses mind versus heart, but sometimes even understanding is attributed to the heart. For example, Quran says they have قلوب لا يفقهون بها لهم قلوب لا, they have hearts by which they don't understand. So in this sense, heart is also responsible for understanding. So heart is the main thing of a human being. Everything is under the command of the heart, and it's only by looking at the heart of someone you can understand whether they are believers or not mind. Maybe someone can teach aqaid, but doesn't mean he's a believer. It's the heart that determines whether this person is pious or not, believer or not, etc.
Do you have time for one last question?
Yes, if it is a brief one.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Shomali. Some scholars state that the soul and the nafs are the same thing. Others say that they are different aspects of the human being. And in the Quran, in Surah 6, Ayah 60, it reads, "It is He who calls your souls back by night, knowing what you have done by day, then raises you up again in the daytime until your fixed term is fulfilled." Can you clarify what is being taken by Allah at night? Is it the nafs or the ruh?
Ruh and human soul are interchangeably used. If we say ruh here, because ruh has other meanings. Ruh can be used for Gabriel, for Holy Spirit. Lots of soul also can be used in different senses, but they overlap when we use them for human beings. So our spirit or ruh is the same as human soul. So you can use human spirit and human soul in the same way. So my nafs is the same as my ruh.
So the nafs is the same as the ruh. Okay. So it's the ruh that's been taken at night when we sleep?
Yeah, but I explained it's partially taken, not that, because Allah takes it partially, so functions go to reduced level. Either then release it or keeps it. If he keeps it,
Okay.
then it's death.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah. Are there any last comments, sisters? If not, we'll let Sheikh Shomali go. Thank you so much.
I request you, inshallah, to remember us in your du'as, and I also
Always.
pray for your tawfiq and health, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Sheikh
Thank you,
Shomali.
Hassan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sheikh.
You're welcome. Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stop.